Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the Earth vessel Horizon and stared at the message on his screen. His jaw tightened as he read the words for the third time. The Valerian government was denying his crew docking privileges at their primary station. This was the same government whose infrastructure his engineers had just spent 6 months rebuilding after a massive solar flare had knocked out their power grid across 3 continents. Jake's first officer, Commander Nicole Hayes, stood beside him with her arms crossed. She had warned him this would happen. She had seen it happen before on other missions. The aliens took what they needed from humans and then slammed the door in their faces. It was a pattern that had repeated itself so many times that it should not have surprised anyone anymore. "Sir, the crew is waiting for orders," Nicole said quietly. Her voice carried no emotion, but Jake could hear the anger beneath it. His people were exhausted. They had worked 16-hour shifts for half a year in difficult conditions. They had saved millions of Valerian lives. They had asked for nothing in return except basic courtesy. Now they could not even dock to resupply before the long journey home. Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about all the missions he had led over the past decade. The Xanthari colony ship that would have drifted into a star if his crew had not repaired their engines. The Krelim plague that human doctors had cured when their own medical experts had given up. The Solthari trade station that human engineers had redesigned to prevent its atmosphere from leaking into space. In every case, humanity had responded to calls for help without hesitation. In every case, they had been treated as temporary workers rather than valued partners. "Set course for Earth," Jake said finally, "and send a message to command. Tell them the Valerians have made their position clear." The Horizon turned away from Valerian space and began the journey home. Jake knew this was not just another disappointment. Something was building across human space. He could feel it in conversations with other captains and in the tone of messages from Earth. Humanity was tired of being used. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Lisa Harper walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council station orbiting Proxima. She carried a data tablet containing 300 pages of documentation. Every page detailed another incident of aliens exploiting human generosity. Trade agreements that favored everyone except humans. Technology-sharing programs where humans gave freely but received nothing. Military alliances where humans did the fighting while aliens collected the benefits. Lisa had spent 20 years in the diplomatic corps. She had believed in the dream of a united galaxy, where species worked together for the common good. She had defended the Council even when its decisions seemed unfair. She had counseled patience when other humans demanded action. But the data on her tablet told a story that could not be ignored or explained away. The council chamber was massive, with seats arranged in circular tiers to accommodate the hundreds of member species. Each species had its own section with environmental controls suited to their biology. The human section was small and located in an outer ring with the other minor species. The major powers like the Vexians and the Xanthari occupied the prime positions near the center. Today's session was supposed to address new security regulations. Lisa had reviewed the proposed changes and felt something break inside her. The regulations would prohibit human vessels from carrying defensive weapons in council space. Not offensive weapons, but defensive ones. The kinds of shields and point defense systems that protected ships from debris and pirates. Every other species would keep their armed fleets, but humans alone would be restricted. The Archon of the Galactic Assembly was a Vexian named Cormath. He stood 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. His species had dominated galactic politics for 1,000 years. He spoke in a deep rumbling voice that the translator rendered as smooth and condescending. "The Council has reviewed humanity's request for reconsideration," Cormath said. "We understand your concerns, but the regulations stand. Humanity is a young species. You lack the experience and stability to be trusted with unrestricted military capabilities in civilized space." Lisa stood and activated her microphone. Around the chamber, delegates from various species turned to look at her. Most appeared bored. This was just another minor dispute that would be resolved with platitudes and empty promises. "Young?" Lisa said. Her voice was calm but carried an edge that made several nearby delegates sit up straighter. "Humanity has been part of this council for 70 years. We have responded to over 4,000 emergency calls. We have shared advances in medicine, engineering, agriculture, and computer science that have benefited every species here. We have asked for nothing but fair treatment and basic respect. Cormath waved one of his hands dismissively. Your contributions are noted and appreciated. But appreciation does not change the facts. Humans are emotional and unpredictable. These regulations are for the good of galactic stability. Lisa felt the anger she had been suppressing for years rise up in her chest. She thought about Jake Morrison and his exhausted crew denied even basic docking rights. She thought about Dr. Amy Chen, who had spent 5 years on Delphia, developing treatments for diseases that did not even affect humans. She thought about the human miners on Kepler, who worked under contracts that would be illegal on Earth but were standard practice in alien space. She had prepared a speech. A careful diplomatic protest with footnotes and references to precedent. It sat unused on her tablet. Instead, she looked up at Cormath and then slowly turned to take in the entire assembly. Hundreds of alien faces, hundreds of species who had used humanity without giving anything real in return. Then Earth withdraws from the galactic community, Lisa said. The words came out clear and final. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began talking at once in their native languages. The translator system struggled to keep up and produced a cacophony of overlapping voices. Cormath's expression shifted from condescension to shock to amusement. Ambassador Harper, he said when the noise died down, you cannot be serious. Humanity needs the Council. Your trade, your security, your entire position in the galaxy depends on Council membership. Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, Archon, we have realized something important. We don't need you. You need us. And we are done providing free labor to people who treat us like children. She gathered her tablet and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the chamber exploded into arguments. Some delegates called for her to be censured. Others demanded an explanation. A few of the minor species who had also been exploited watched her go with expressions of wonder and envy. Lisa did not look back. She had one more stop to make before leaving the station. She needed to send a message to Earth. A message that would change everything. President Daniel Cross stood before the cameras in the White House briefing room. Every major news network across Earth and its colonies was broadcasting his address. Beyond the journalists, he could see the faces of his advisors who had helped him prepare for this moment. This was not just another policy announcement. This was the most significant decision humanity had made since first contact with alien life 2 centuries ago. My fellow humans, Daniel began. His voice was steady and clear. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in our history. As of this moment, Earth and all human settlements are withdrawing from the Galactic Council. Every human citizen working in alien space has 60 days to return home. Every aid mission will be terminated. Every joint project will be abandoned. We are coming home. The reaction was immediate. On Earth, some people cheered while others protested. In the colonies, the response was more uniform. Most humans living outside Earth had experienced alien prejudice firsthand. They understood why this was necessary. Within hours of the announcement, the exodus began. Commander Ryan Beck had been given the most challenging logistics assignment in human history. He sat in the orbital command center above Earth and watched the tracking displays fill with ships. 12 million humans were scattered across 40 star systems. They all needed to get home safely and quickly. Ryan had 60 days to make it happen. Status report, Ryan said to his operations team. A young officer named Katie Wells brought up the current numbers. Sir, we have confirmed locations for 11.7 million citizens. The remaining 300,000 are on ships in transit or in remote locations. We are working on contact protocols. Ryan nodded and began issuing orders. Every cargo hauler was being repurposed for passenger transport. Every military vessel was being assigned escort duty. Every commercial flight was being rerouted to pick up humans from alien worlds. It was organized chaos on a scale that had never been attempted before. At the Delphian Medical Complex, Dr. Amy Chen packed her research into storage containers. She had spent 5 years here developing regenerative therapies that could regrow damaged organs. The work was groundbreaking, and she was 3 months away from human trials. Her Delphian supervisor stood in the doorway of her lab with his tentacles curled in distress. Dr. Chen, please reconsider, he said through his translator. This research could save millions of lives. Not just Delphian lives, but humans too. You cannot simply abandon it. Amy sealed the last container and turned to face him. She had liked working with the Delphians. They were kind and genuinely interested in scientific progress. But kindness was not the same as respect. She had been denied authorship on 3 papers because the Delphian Medical Board said humans were too junior to be lead researchers. Her proposals for testing had been delayed repeatedly, while Delphian scientists took credit for her breakthroughs. "I am not abandoning the research," Amy said calmly. "I am taking it home where it will be appreciated. You have copies of the basic work. If you want the advanced protocols, you can negotiate with Earth like any other foreign power." The supervisor's translator made a sound of protest, but Amy was already walking past him. In the corridor, she joined 39 other human scientists who were also leaving. They had worked together for years, and not one of them had second thoughts about going home. They loaded their belongings onto a transport shuttle and left Delphia without looking back. On the orbital station above Earth, Lieutenant Greg Palmer stood at the docking control center. A Solthari diplomatic vessel had just requested permission to dock. Greg checked the manifest and saw it was carrying their ambassador along with a security detail. He opened a communication channel. "Solthari vessel, this is Earth Station Control. State your business." The ambassador's face appeared on screen. He was a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle. His expression showed irritation at being questioned. "I am Ambassador Vrel. I demand to speak with your president immediately about these illegal sanctions." Greg smiled politely. "Ambassador, Earth does not recognize Galactic Council authority anymore. We also do not recognize galactic currency, trade law, or diplomatic immunity. If you wish to dock, you will need to follow our procedures and pay our fees in Earth credits." Vrel's 3 eyes widened. "This is outrageous. The Council will impose economic sanctions. Your trade routes will be blocked. Your colonies will be isolated. That is certainly your right to try," Greg said. His tone remained pleasant but firm. "However, I should mention that as of yesterday, all human merchant vessels have been recalled. We are not using galactic trade routes anymore, and our colonies are supplied by our own ships, so your sanctions will not affect us much. Now, do you want to dock or not?" The ambassador sputtered for several seconds before cutting the connection. The Solthari vessel turned and left Earth space. Greg made a note in the log and returned to his other duties. This would not be the last alien diplomat who learned that the old rules no longer applied. On the mining world of Kepler, Katie Wells faced a different kind of problem. The local Draven overseer was refusing to let the human workers leave. He stood blocking the entrance to the transport bay with a squad of security drones. Katie and her crew of 200 miners stood facing him. "Your contracts are not complete," the overseer said. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "You agreed to work for 18 months. Only 14 have passed. If you leave now, you forfeit all payment and benefits." Katie stepped forward. She was a small woman, but she had spent 10 years in the mines and nobody questioned her authority. "Those contracts were signed under Galactic Council labor law. Earth does not recognize those laws anymore. We are leaving and you cannot stop us." The overseer activated his security drones. 10 of them rose into the air with weapons charging. Katie did not flinch. She pulled out a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. Every drone suddenly went dark and fell to the ground. "Did you really think humans would work with equipment we could not control?" Katie asked. "We built those drones. We know how to shut them down. Now get out of our way." The overseer stepped aside. He had no other security, and even if he did, the humans outnumbered his staff 20 to 1. Katie led her crew onto the transport, and within an hour they were off Kepler and heading home. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On research stations, human scientists packed up their work. On construction sites, human engineers walked off half-finished projects. On alien warships, human technical advisors departed without training replacements. In hospitals, human doctors completed their current cases and then left. In schools, human teachers finished their classes and boarded transports. The speed of the withdrawal shocked the alien species. They had assumed humans would negotiate or at least delay. They had expected protests and debates and compromise. Instead, they got efficiency and determination. Within 30 days, 70% of humans had already returned to human space. By day 45, the number reached 97%. The only humans who remained were those who had married aliens and chose to stay with their families. Even many of them eventually returned, bringing their alien spouses and hybrid children. Earth opened its borders to any alien who was family to a human citizen. It was the only exception to the complete separation. President Cross watched the numbers climb on his display. Commander Beck had done the impossible. 12 million people relocated in less than 2 months with only minor incidents. Now came the hard part. Humanity had to prove it could thrive without the galactic community. Daniel had no doubts they would succeed. The resources and energy that had flowed outward for decades would now build something new. Something better. Something that belonged only to humanity. The Nexus trade network crashed on a Tuesday morning. The massive quantum routing system that connected thousands of trade stations across the galaxy simply stopped working. Error messages cascaded through the network faster than anyone could read them. Within 6 hours, trade had ground to a halt across 12 sectors. The Nexus administrators tried everything they knew to fix the problem, but nothing worked. The issue was simple once they understood it. Human programmers had maintained the core routing algorithms for 40 years. They had patched problems, optimized code, and upgraded systems so seamlessly that most aliens never realized how much work went into keeping everything running. Now those programmers were gone, and nobody else understood the code well enough to fix it. On the agricultural world of Vorim, the harvest was failing. The soil optimization system that had tripled crop yields over the past decade was producing nonsense data. Fields that should have been planted with protein-rich grains were being seeded with decorative flowers. Irrigation systems were flooding some areas while leaving others to dry out. The Vorim agricultural minister stared at the reports in disbelief. "Get the human technicians back," she ordered her staff. "Offer them whatever they want. Triple salary, full citizenship rights, anything." Her aide shook his head sadly. "Minister, we have tried. All messages to human space go unanswered. They have closed their communication gateways to non-human traffic. We cannot even reach them." The minister felt cold fear settle in her stomach. The Vorim population was 8 billion. They depended entirely on optimized agriculture to feed everyone. Without the human systems, they would face food shortages within months and starvation within a year. In the medical stations orbiting Keltor, the situation was becoming critical. The head of pharmaceutical supplies studied her inventory reports and tried not to panic. Over 40% of common medications were synthesized using processes developed by human chemists. The stations had stockpiles, but those would run out in 3 to 4 months. After that, people would start dying from treatable conditions. She sent urgent requests to other species asking if they could produce the needed drugs. Most responded that they lacked the facilities or knowledge. A few offered to try but warned it might take years to replicate the human processes. The medical chief realized with growing horror that her people had become dependent on human expertise without ever acknowledging it. Counselor, Vren of the Keltorian Union, called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. He was a proud being who had voted for every measure that restricted or limited humanity. Now he stood before the assembly and demanded action. "Earth must be sanctioned immediately," Vren declared. His voice carried moral outrage. "They have abandoned their obligations. They have left critical systems to fail. They have put billions of lives at risk. This is unacceptable behavior and must be punished." A Draven counselor raised a claw. "What obligations exactly?" "I have reviewed the records. Humanity never signed binding agreements to maintain our infrastructure. They never agreed to provide free technical support. They never committed to sharing their innovations. Everything they did was voluntary." Vren's face flushed darker. "That is a technicality. They created dependencies. They made themselves essential. They cannot simply walk away." "But they can," a quiet voice said. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Counselor Myra from one of the minor species. She rarely spoke in council sessions. "They can walk away because we never gave them real reasons to stay. We took their help but denied them respect. We used their skills but refused them authority. We benefited from their generosity but blocked their advancement. Why should they stay?" The chamber fell silent. Nobody wanted to admit she was right, but the evidence was overwhelming. The council voted on sanctions, but the motion failed. Without human participation, there was nothing to sanction. Earth had withdrawn completely. There was no trade to restrict because humans were not trading with anyone. There were none. Joint projects to cancel because humans had already left them all. Captain Nexia Voth sat in her quarters on the exploration vessel Wanderer and tried again to contact Ben Richards. He was a human navigator she had worked with for 5 years. Together they had charted the Obsidian Nebula and discovered 3 habitable worlds. They had survived equipment failures, spatial anomalies, and a close encounter with a hostile species. Ben had saved her life twice, and she had saved his once. Her message bounced back with an automated response. All human communication channels were closed to non-human traffic. No exceptions. Nexia felt something she had not experienced in years. Loneliness. She realized that Ben had been more than a colleague. He had been a friend, perhaps her only real friend, and she had never told him that because Zenthari did not express such feelings to other species. She wondered if Ben ever thought about their time together. She wondered if he was angry at her people for how they had treated humanity. She wondered if she would ever see him again. The automated message offered no answers. It just repeated the same cold words over and over. On Earth, Director Paula Grant stood in the Orbital Control Center and watched the flow of resources on her displays. For decades, those resources had streamed outward to alien worlds in the form of aid, technology, and expertise. Now they were being redirected inward. The change was dramatic and the possibilities were exciting. "Show me the Venus Project," Paula said to her assistant. The display shifted to show construction in orbit around humanity's sister planet. Massive orbital mirrors were being assembled to reduce surface temperature. Atmospheric processors were being deployed to convert the toxic air into something breathable. It was the most ambitious terraforming project humanity had ever attempted. "Timeline?" Paula asked. 40 years to basic habitability, her assistant replied. 70 years to full Earth normal environment. But the projections are conservative. We have 16,000 engineers working on optimization. They think we can cut the timeline by 20%. Paula smiled. Those engineers had been scattered across the galaxy fixing alien problems. Now they were focused on human goals and the results were already showing. Construction was ahead of schedule. Innovation was accelerating. Projects that had been delayed for decades were suddenly moving forward. She switched the display to show the Jupiter system. Ring habitats were being built around the gas giant. Each ring could house 10 million people in comfortable Earth-like environments. The construction yards were working at full capacity and new yards were being added every month. Within 50 years, Jupiter would have more human population than Earth itself. "What about the colony ships?" Paula asked. 16 in construction, her assistant said. The first 3 will be ready in 18 months. They are going to Tau Ceti, Epsilon Eridani, and Wolf 359. All systems we surveyed but never colonized because the Council claimed them as neutral zones. Paula nodded. The galaxy was vast and humanity had only touched a tiny fraction of it. The so-called neutral zones had been a way for the Council to control expansion by any one species. Now that humanity was no longer bound by Council rules, they could settle wherever they wanted. There were hundreds of suitable systems within reach. "And the defense fleet?" Paula asked quietly. Her assistant's expression became serious. "Production is accelerating. We will have 50 new warships operational within 2 years. The designs are all human. No shared technology, no alien components, no weaknesses that others might exploit." Paula understood the necessity. Humanity was alone now. They had no allies and potentially many enemies. Some species might see the withdrawal as weakness and try to take advantage. Others might try to force humanity back into the old relationship through military pressure. Earth needed to be strong enough to defend itself and all its scattered colonies. She looked out at the stars through the station's observation windows. Somewhere out there, the galactic community was struggling with the consequences of its own arrogance. Systems were failing. Trade was disrupted. Medical supplies were running short. And humanity was not coming to rescue them this time. Paula felt no satisfaction in their suffering, but no guilt either. Humanity had given freely for 70 years and received nothing but contempt in return. Now they were building their own future. A future where humans answered to no one but themselves. A future where their innovations benefited their own people first. A future where respect was not requested but commanded through strength and achievement. The stars were still out there waiting. Humanity would reach them eventually, but this time they would do it on their own terms. 18 months after humanity withdrew from the galaxy, the Tertian Banking Guild released a report that sent shockwaves through every civilized world. The galactic economy was on the verge of collapse. 30% of essential services across Council space were critically degraded. Infrastructure that humans had built or maintained was failing at an accelerating rate. The report used careful diplomatic language, but the message was clear. The galaxy was falling apart without humanity. The Krelum faced the worst crisis. Their agricultural systems had completely failed 3 months earlier. Emergency food supplies were running out and famine was spreading across their colonies. The Krelim premier stood before his parliament and announced that they had no choice. They had to ask Earth for help. The message was sent through every available channel. The Krelim offered payment in rare minerals, in technology, and political favors. They offered to make humanity full partners in their agricultural sector. They offered formal apologies for past treatment. The message was desperate and humbling for a species that had once considered humans barely civilized. On Earth, Chief Administrator Helen Moore received the Krelim request. She read it carefully and then read it again. She thought about the Krelim plague 15 years ago, when human doctors had worked around the clock to develop a cure. The Krelim had accepted the cure but refused to share their own medical database, claiming it was proprietary information. Now they were starving and wanted help again. Helen composed a response. It was a single sentence followed by a data package. "We respectfully decline, but here is everything you need to fix the systems yourselves." The data package contained full technical specifications for the agricultural optimization systems. It included detailed instructions and troubleshooting guides. Everything the Krelim needed was there. Everything except human experts to do the work for them. The Krelim premier read the response and felt something break inside him. The humans were not being cruel. They were being fair. They had given the Krelim the tools to save themselves. Whether the Krelim succeeded or failed was now their own responsibility. It was a hard lesson, but one that should have been learned decades ago. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched his tactical display. A fleet of Vexian warships had gathered at the edge of human space. They were not in attack formation, but they were clearly waiting for something. Jake's communications officer looked up from her console. "Sir, the Vexian fleet commander is requesting to speak with you. He says it is urgent." Jake nodded and the main screen switched to show a Vexian officer. He recognized the officer from intelligence reports. Commander Thex was considered one of the best tactical minds in the Vexian military. His presence here was concerning. "Admiral Morrison," Thex began. His translator carried tones of stress. "I am requesting military assistance on behalf of the Vexian Empire. We have encountered an unknown hostile species in the Outer Rim. They are aggressive and their technology is formidable. Our forces have suffered significant losses. We need human tactical support and possibly direct military intervention." Jake felt old anger stir in his chest. He remembered the years he had spent responding to alien military emergencies. He remembered the Battle of Kepler Station, where his ship had been badly damaged protecting a Vexian colony. The Vexian government had sent a brief thank you message and then voted against human representation on the Security Council the following month. "Commander Thex," Jake said slowly, "I appreciate you bringing this situation to our attention. However, Earth is no longer part of the Galactic Council defense network. We have our own security concerns to address. I will send you all tactical data we have on unknown hostile species in that region, but we cannot provide direct assistance." Thex's expression showed shock. "Admiral, this threat could spread. If we fall, the entire Outer Rim is exposed. This affects everyone, including humanity." "Then I suggest you find allies and work together," Jake replied. "Humanity spent 70 years fighting battles for species who gave us nothing in return. We are done being the galaxy's military force. You have the data. Use it well." Defiance out, the screen went dark. Jake's first officer, Commander Nicole Hayes, stepped closer. "Sir, intelligence suggests the hostile species might actually pose a real threat. Should we monitor the situation?" "We will monitor it," Jake confirmed. "And if they threaten human space, we will respond with overwhelming force. But the Vexian problems are not our problems anymore. They wanted us out of galactic affairs. They got their wish." Nicole nodded in agreement. Around the bridge, other officers showed similarly, or expressions of grim satisfaction. Everyone present had lost friends or colleagues in missions to help aliens who did not appreciate the sacrifice. The time for free protection was over. On the council station, Archon Cormath faced the worst crisis of his long political career. Member species were demanding his resignation. The Galactic Assembly was in chaos. Infrastructure was failing. Trade had collapsed. Military threats were emerging. And all of it could be traced back to the regulations he had pushed through that drove humanity away. A group of younger counselors had formed a coalition demanding major reforms. They wanted the council charter rewritten to prevent any species from being exploited the way humanity had been. They wanted binding agreements instead of vague promises. They wanted equality enforced by law, rather than assumed by tradition. Cormath had fought them every step, but his support was eroding daily. The Draven ambassador cornered him after a particularly brutal session. "Archon, you must fix this. My people are suffering. Our mining operations are running at 40% capacity without human technical support. Our economy is in recession. You promised that sanctioning humanity would force them to negotiate. Instead, they have thrived while we collapse." Cormath felt exhausted. His pride had cost the galaxy dearly, and he knew it. "I underestimated them. I believed they needed us more than we needed them. I was wrong." "Then admit it publicly," the Draven ambassador said. "Apologize to humanity. Offer them whatever they want to come back. Swallow your pride before we all starve." Cormath spent a week drafting an apology. It was the most difficult document he had ever written. Admitting fault went against everything his culture valued. But the alternative was watching the galactic community tear itself apart. The apology was 3 pages long and took multiple revisions. When it was finally complete, he sent it through official channels to Earth. Ambassador Lisa Harper received the apology in her office at the Earth diplomatic headquarters. She read it once and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just a kind of tired disappointment. The words were nice, but they came too late and cost nothing. Cormath had not resigned. The Council had not reformed its laws. This was just an attempt to manipulate humanity back into the old relationship with prettier language. Lisa filed the apology in the archives and composed a response. "Received and noted," 2 words. That was all the response Cormath would get. She sent it and then deleted his contact from her priority list. Earth had more important things to worry about than galactic politics. In the council chamber when Cormath announced that Earth had acknowledged his apology but sent no substantial response, the gathered delegates understood what it meant. Words were not enough. Promises were not enough. Humanity had moved beyond caring what the council thought or said. They were building their own future, and the galaxy could either adapt or fade into irrelevance. Some species began reaching out to Earth individually. They offered real concessions and genuine partnership. The Delphians proposed joint research programs with shared credit and profits. The Keltorians suggested mutual defense pacts with equal obligations. A few minor species asked if they could emigrate to human space entirely, having seen how Earth treated its citizens. Earth evaluated each proposal carefully. Some were accepted, most were politely declined. Humanity was in no hurry to rebuild galactic relationships. They had learned that trust had to be earned and respect had to be genuine. The aliens who had taken humanity for granted were discovering that second chances were not guaranteed. The galaxy was changing. Old alliances were breaking apart. New conflicts were emerging. The careful balance that had existed for centuries was collapsing. And through it all, humanity watched from their growing empire of stars and continued building something better than what they had left behind. 5 years after humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council, the difference was visible from space. Earth and its colonies glowed with activity and construction. New stations orbited every major planet in the solar system. Shipyards stretched for thousands of kilometers, producing vessels at a rate that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Mars had transformed from a red desert into a world with blue oceans and green continents. The asteroid belt hummed with mining operations that fed the endless construction projects. Professor Carl Hayes stood before an audience of 10,000 scientists at the Earth Science Summit. His presentation covered the technological advances humanity had achieved since the withdrawal. The numbers were stunning. Fusion power technology had improved by 40%. Quantum computing speeds had tripled. Gravity manipulation systems that had been theoretical were now practical and deployed on dozens of ships. "The correlation is clear," Carl said, as he showed charts comparing the before and after periods. "When we were part of the galactic community, our innovation rate was artificially slowed. We spent enormous resources helping others catch up. We delayed our own projects to work on alien problems. We shared breakthroughs immediately instead of fully developing them ourselves. Now those constraints are gone and our progress has accelerated dramatically." The audience applauded. Everyone in the room had experienced the change personally. Scientists who had spent years on alien worlds doing routine maintenance were now pushing the boundaries of their fields. Engineers who had been fixing ancient alien infrastructure were now designing revolutionary new systems. Doctors who had treated alien diseases were now extending human lifespans and curing conditions once thought incurable. The transformation was not just technological. Human culture was changing too. Art and literature flourished as creative minds returned from alien worlds and brought new perspectives. Music combined Earth traditions with influences from dozens of alien cultures to create entirely new forms of expression. Philosophy and ethics were being re-examined in light of humanity's experience with galactic civilization. Director Paula Grant reviewed reports from the Colonial Expansion Program. 16 colony ships had been launched over the past 5 years. 3 had already established successful settlements on worlds the Council had classified as neutral zones. The colonists sent back messages filled with excitement and optimism. They were building communities that belonged entirely to humans with laws and customs that reflected human values. The Mars terraforming is complete ahead of schedule, her assistant informed her. The atmosphere is Earth normal. Temperature regulation is stable. The oceans are thriving. Governor Lucas Martinez says they are ready to begin accepting immigration applications. Paula felt genuine pride. Mars had been a dream for centuries. Now it was reality. And it had been accomplished by human determination without any alien assistance. The techniques developed for Mars were already being applied to Venus, which was progressing even faster than anticipated. Within 20 years, humanity would have 3 fully terraformed worlds in one solar system. What is the status of the defense fleet? Paula asked. 70 warships operational with another 100 in construction. Admiral Morrison reports the fleet is ready for any contingency. The new ship designs are significantly more advanced than anything in the galactic navies. Our weapons are more powerful, our shields are stronger, and our engines are faster. Paula nodded. Humanity had not built this fleet out of aggression but out of necessity. They were alone in a galaxy that had proven itself hostile to human interests. The fleet was insurance against anyone who might see humanity's isolation as weakness. So far, no one had tested that theory, and Paula hoped it would stay that way. Meanwhile, in what remained of the Galactic Council, things were falling apart. The Xanthari and Draven had resumed their centuries-old border war. Without human mediators to negotiate peace, the conflict escalated quickly. 3 star systems became contested zones and civilian casualties mounted. The Council tried to intervene but lacked the authority and resources to enforce peace. The Solthari economic bloc had collapsed entirely. Trade agreements that relied on human technical support became worthless when no one could maintain the systems. Member species withdrew to protect their own interests, and the careful economic balance that had existed for decades unraveled in months. Recession spread across multiple sectors, causing hardship for billions. 3 minor species went extinct. Their life support systems failed due to lack of maintenance, and no one stepped in to save them. In the past, human engineers would have responded to emergency calls and found solutions. Now those calls went unanswered and entire civilizations died. The tragedy shocked the galaxy, but also served as a harsh reminder of how much had been taken for granted. The Galactic Council station itself was failing. Operating at barely 50% capacity, the station struggled with basic functions. Environmental systems malfunctioned. Power distribution was unreliable. The quantum communication network had so many errors that important messages were often lost or corrupted. Archon Cormeth had been removed from power and exiled in disgrace. His replacement was a coalition of younger leaders who understood that fundamental changes were necessary. They prepared one final delegation to Earth. This time they did not send the old guard of established powers. Instead, they chose representatives from species who had advocated for treating humanity fairly all along. Species who had opposed the exploitative policies even when it cost them politically. Species who genuinely wanted to build a better galactic community, based on mutual respect rather than convenience. The delegation arrived at Earth and requested a meeting with President Daniel Cross. They were made to wait 3 days, which itself was a message. When they were finally granted an audience, they met the president not in some grand diplomatic hall, but in a simple conference room in Geneva. Daniel Cross sat across from them, looking relaxed and confident. He had been re-elected in a landslide after the success of the withdrawal, and his political position was unshakable. The delegation leader was a Delphian named Surith. She spoke carefully and honestly. President Cross, we come not with demands or even requests, but with acknowledgement. The galactic community failed humanity. We took your contributions for granted. We denied you respect while exploiting your generosity. We treated you as servants rather than partners. We were wrong and we apologize without reservation." Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty. What do you want from Earth?" "We want to know what it would take for humanity to rejoin the galactic community," Surith said. "We have begun reforming the Council Charter. We are establishing binding laws to prevent exploitation. We are creating mechanisms for true equality, but we need to know if there is any path forward or if humanity has decided to remain separate permanently." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He had discussed this moment with his advisors many times. They had debated various responses and negotiating positions, but in the end, Daniel decided to be as honest with them as they had been with him. "You want to know what it takes?" Daniel said. "True equality written into law, not just promised in speeches. Veto power on the Security Council for Humanity. Full economic partnership with fair trade terms. Reparations for 70 years of exploitation. Recognition of human sovereignty over all systems we currently occupy or claim. And binding agreements that give humanity the same rights and protections as any founding species." The delegates looked at each other. Some of the terms were harsh. Some would require significant political capital to achieve, but none were unreasonable given the history. Shurith started to respond, but Daniel raised his hand. "But here is the thing," he continued. "We do not actually need you anymore. We have discovered that humanity thrives on its own. Our technology advances faster. Our economy grows stronger. Our people are happier. We are building an empire that will eventually rival anything in galactic history. So take our terms or leave them. Either way, humanity will be fine. We are not desperate for your acceptance. We are not begging to return. If you want us back, you will meet our conditions completely. No compromises, no negotiations, no gradual reforms. All of it or none of it." He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "You know where to find us when you are ready to treat us as true equals. Until then, humanity has work to do. We have worlds to terraform, colonies to build, and a future to create. A future that belongs to us and no one else." The delegates left Earth without an agreement. They returned to the Council and reported what had been said. The debate that followed lasted months. Some species met humanity's terms and established bilateral treaties as genuine partners. These species found that working with humanity as equals was far more productive than the old exploitative relationship had been. They gained access to human technology and expertise in exchange for fair compensation and mutual respect. Other species refused. They clung to pride or tradition, or the belief that things would eventually return to how they were. These species remained locked out of human space, watching with growing envy as humanity's influence expanded across the stars. They saw human colonies spreading to systems they had ignored. They saw human trade networks that did not include them. They saw a future where humanity was a major power, and they were increasingly irrelevant. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but the cost had been high. You cannot build a civilization on the backs of those you refuse to respect. You cannot take endlessly from those who give freely and expect them to keep giving forever. You cannot treat partners as servants and then act surprised when they walk away. Humanity had walked away and they never looked back. They had built something better than what they left behind, something that was truly theirs. And if the galaxy wanted to be part of that future, it would have to earn the privilege through genuine respect and fair treatment. The age of exploiting humanity was over. The age of humanity standing alone and standing strong had begun.